Going. Good afternoon and welcome to the July 27th, 2016 Legal and Finance meeting. And I would like to ask for a roll call and determination of quorum. Here. Here. Thank you very much. Now is the adoption of the agenda, and there's an item to be added.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to add 18A, authorize mayor and finance officer to sign letter agreement with Crown Castle LA for a cell tower lease amendment.
And we'll add that as 18A. And all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passes. So this is time for general public comment. I don't believe I have any general public comment. So we will close general public comment. And we will go to consent items 1 through 11. Are there any consent items that anyone on this committee wants to pull? Oh, public comment, I'm sorry. Any public comment on 1 through 11? And there is not, so we'll close that. Now I'll ask if there's any items 1 through 11 that anyone on this committee wants to pull. First we have Steve Laurenti.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd like to pull item 11, please.
And Amanda Scott. Okay. So can I have a motion to approve items 1 through 11, excluding item 11?
So moved.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Items pass. We'll go to item number 11. Item 11, City Attorney's Office number LF 072716-008, update to council regarding ordinance regulating short-term rentals. And the floor is open. Amanda Scott has the floor.
Thank you. I believe Jessica is in the audience. Jessica, if you could approach the podium. Jessica Rogers from our City Attorney's Office. Chair, if I can ask a couple questions of Jessica?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So, Jessica, do you plan on doing a presentation at Monday's council meeting? Because the council meeting on Monday is at 10 a.m. It's outside of our normal scheduled time for city council meetings, but that's due to the mayor and city council members having other obligations. Did you plan on doing a presentation or a review of the ordinance?
I'm actually going to have to defer to Carla Cushman in our office. I was handling the enforcement on the one issue, which is why you had my name, but she's actually going to be writing it, so.
Okay. Okay. So, Carla, do you have a presentation, or are you just looking for the council to give you the go-ahead to work on the ordinance?
This is on your agenda because when it was before you in April or March, you said you directed staff to bring back an ordinance within 90 to 120 days. 120 days ends tomorrow. So we're just notifying you that we're working on it, and you'll be seeing it in the next we're hoping to have it before Planning Commission at the end of August, so you'll see it after that. So it's just merely informational. I mean, I can answer some questions if you'd like, or you'll be talking about it hopefully in the next month or so.
No, you answered the question I was looking for. Is I didn't know there's really nothing linked, and so I wasn't sure if something was coming before us or what this was. So if your update is the city attorney's office is still working on it, I'm good with that. So.
Yes, and we didn't want to ignore the deadline that you'd given us, so that's why it's before you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'll yield the floor.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. That is the end of the consent items. Now we're on non-consent items 12 through 18, and public comment is opened. And we will start on item 18 because it's the only one we have any for, with Dennis Halterman. Mr. Halterman, you have 3 minutes once you start speaking.
Well, hopefully I won't take the whole 3 minutes. Thank you very much for your time in discussing this afternoon. This has to do with the Dove Center that's in our neighborhood that we've discussed. The Dove Center's planned for, in conjunction with their yearly Dove County Fair church social that they have, this rodeo under the Mr. Stewins Extreme Ministries is one of the companies that operates that building. Here's how I want to start out. This is a bit awkward when we start talking about churches and religion. This isn't about religion at all. It's certainly not about the merits of Mr. Stewins Extreme Ministries. It's about the location, not the merits at all. And sometimes in this conversation, it seems to insinuate otherwise. And I think that's very unfair to everybody and way off the appropriate playing field. It's very unfair to all of us that live in that neighborhood. It's certainly unfair to this council to couch it in that direction because this is about the location. The Dove does many things that you never hear from us. Last Friday or a week or so ago, they had movies they put on the side of the building. They've had the fairs before where they have some great stuff, some great community stuff where families get together. Gunny sack races, piting. We can hear the giggling and fun, and we know that those are fun and appropriate things. But when we get to things like motocrosses, we're moving outside of the boundaries of our low-density residential. And what really concerns me then when we come up here and discuss this is Mr. Stewin has a tendency to minimize his true intention. If we recall in the rodeo, there was one bull and one rider that turned into dirt work that was not done with a permit. It was 30 bulls, 30 riders, sheep that escaped. It was our one small lane getting out of our neighborhood completely clogged with traffic that was people way outside of the congregation that it exists. They had a tent blocking the way in and way out that they were stopping cars for. I'm not sure why they were stopping cars there. I didn't stop and inquire. So what it really is, there's nothing about this extreme that is proper in our low-density residential. But the good news is there's no shortage in our area of land to have extreme ministries and things of that nature. There's plenty of rodeos to have out there. In a review of Dove's social media reveals that Stewin is working to franchise this and make this his headquarters. They're referring to it as the campus, and that may be a great idea, but it's in the wrong area for that to have. And the ordinance in question, it specifically excludes revival tents, and this is essentially the modern day equivalent. Church socials are okay, bringing in, but when we start talking about other events outside of the existing congregation, it's exactly what the clear intent
Mr.
was.
Holterman,
Yes.
could you wrap it up, please?
Sure. So I guess what we have here is it appears we're having the intent of what's called normalization of deviation when we're gradually stripping away our low-density residential protection that we all have. So what I'm going to ask today is that it just make it clear, the same assurances we were given under the rodeo, that these type of things aren't the proper use and that this just can't go on. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Now we'll have Mr. Mike Kwasny.
Mr. Chair, Councilman, Councilwomen,
Could you give us your name and your address?
my name is
for the
Mike
record?
Kwasny, 1512 Lark Drive,
Thank
right
you.
below the Dove Center. I am actually, what is the zoning for the Civic Center and the fairgrounds? I think you guys know what that is. It is not low-density residential. The purpose of zoning is to promote safe, health, morals, and convenience and general welfare, to encourage the use of lands and natural resources in the city, in the ordinance, with character, adaptability, suitability, and for particular purposes, to conserve social, economic stability, property values, and general character and trend of community development, to prevent excessive concentration of population, to lessen congestion of streets and highways, sewerage and drainage, water supply, distribution, education, and other public resources by establishing herein standards for community development in accordance with these objectives and by providing for the enforcement of such standards. These are right off the city's zoning. I was told during talks with some council and a city attorney that funerals can amass a large group. I would make the point that if there is a funeral that brings many, they use the civic center or other buildings that are more designed for large groups trying to solve problems more comfortable for all. I was also informed that the police and the fire department are okay with this event. While I respect and appreciate their feedback, I am not sure that that matters for the events that they are deciding to have on this property and in our neighborhood. Central States Fairground regularly accommodates sporting events ranging in size from small groups, 25, to major championships. I would propose the Rushmore Civic Center is used for the same kind of events. There are many other less expensive, more user-friendly options that one could also find. While I applaud the Dove Center for sponsoring such events, we just ask them to find a more appropriate area. At Easter, there are churches who have services at the Civic Center because the crowds expected are going to be large. I'm assuming they are trying to get a crowd at this event, trying to amass as many customers as they can. I would be remiss if I did not mention that we are at the edge of a park which forbids off-road vehicles, and to propose that this promotes some of the use if this area were used for off-road vehicles. Not all see the law the same way. We could have kids that think that it's okay. I apologize for putting our officials at this position, having to referee something I feel we need to take care of as a residential community, not involving you. I would challenge the people at the Doves Christian Center to understand that we are asking to set aside these feelings
Mr.
we're all
Quasny,
having.
could you
I got
wrap it
one
up?
more statement and I'll wrap it up.
Thank you.
I understand we are not telling them they can sponsor such events, just do them in a more appropriate avenue. Sorry to say, our chosen representative must be parents in this case and decide who gets the last piece of candy. I am asking that that you choose to consider what I have mentioned today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Adam Fute? Name and address for the record, please, and you got 3 minutes.
Adam Foote is my name. My address is 1009 Rough Lock Lane in Spearfish. I work at the Dove Christian Center. And I am here on behalf of the pastorate of the Dove to answer any questions that the council may have from a logistical point of view. That was really my purpose for speaking this afternoon.
Thank you very much. Then I guess I will call Mr. Timothy Stewin.
Thanks, members of the council. Timothy Stewin, 660 Earlene Street, Rapid City. I don't really have much to say either, other than just to give a short, concise reason for our activities. Once again, you all know my history. I was a bull rider at one time, and God called me out the back of the buck and chutes and stuck me into behind a box, a pulpit. Been preaching ever since. I met the Lord at a bull riding. So that's why we had a bull riding a few years ago, 3 years to be exact. And this year we decided to add to our Dove County Fair, which we've done for 6 years now, a freestyle motocross event. It's not motocross racing per se. It's just 4 guys on motorcycles that'll be jumping. And it's going to help for people to see the Lord. And just the same way that I got called out of the rodeo arena is the same way I feel like this is going to kind of be a burning bush, like the Moses experience, where people will say, what is this wondrous sight? And maybe the Lord can get a hold of them through the activities that we produce. And I think that's what our church is all about, is to, rather than being in a holy huddle up on the hill, to represent the Lord Jesus Christ and the gospel, and let as many people as possible see it through whatever avenue we choose fit. I guess there's no regulation biblically on how to preach the gospel, other than you just make sure Jesus is glorified and that the body of believers is excited about that. And so that's what we want to portray and display. and let people have an avenue that's family fun, supporting our values. And we'd also like to add something with the police officers. Things going on in our nation against police officers is pretty disgusting to me. And so I've been in conversation with Lieutenant John about maybe honoring our authorities and letting the city know that we appreciate their services. And I just want to take a moment and say thank you to these two gentlemen in their badges and attire. Thank you for your service to our city. And so just a short little thing on our intent, and appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stewin. So we will close public comment now, and we will go to item 12 under our Alderman items, number LF 072716-01, and this is an update on summer nights. I see Sandy Schwan is here, so Sandy, you got 3 minutes. No, I'm just kidding.
Apparently you haven't met me. I'm Sandy Schwan. I'm the president of Rapid City Summer Nights. I live at 6507 Dunsmore Road, and thank you for inviting me to give you an update. We have completed week 8 of 14 in our series this year, and I think that for the most part it's going well. We had a couple minor issues in the first few weeks regarding timing of street closure and the methods in which we clear the cars from the parking spots. Working with Lieutenant Ragnone and Lieutenant Eisenbraun, and of course the chief and the assistant chief, and some communication with those business owners. I think we've worked all of those out. For those of you who have been to Summer Nights, you will have noticed that we purchased refrigerated beverage trailers, and they have helped dramatically. As a matter of fact, one of the compromises we were able to make is that we now don't have to close the street on 7th Street until 3:30 in the afternoon, because they've made us more efficient. It's cut about 30 minutes off our setup time and 30 minutes off our teardown time compared to years in the past. We've had no major issues in terms of alcohol-related issues or other things, unless, of course, Chief Jaggeris has something that he knows that has happened that I'm not aware of, but we've had a very mild crowd, as we have in most years. We have actually had a larger crowd, or at least the crowd seemed to be coming earlier as opposed to waiting until it cools off later in the night. Our revenues are up this year, and as of June 30th, we have collected about $8,900 in sales tax, and we hope that continues throughout the rest of the summer. Does anyone have any questions for me?
I don't, but I'll open it up to the committee. And Amanda Scott, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Sandy. So I believe the City Council approved a 3-year permit, if my memory serves me correctly?
Correct. This is year 2 of 3.
And that's what I was going to ask you, is if this is year 2 of 3. So are you seeing the relationship between Summer Nights Board and the downtown business owners improving over the last 18 months?
Yes, we've had, like I said, we had a couple issues at the beginning of the season, due mostly to the fact that last year we adjusted our methods for clearing the streets a couple of times as a compromise to try to find a method that everybody liked. And then we did go door to door at the beginning of the season to remind them that we're starting and what dates and give us our cell phone numbers. But because we changed it a couple times last year, there was some confusion about actually how we go about signing and removing the streets, and so most of that we've worked out. We have one business owner that doesn't like the cones in front of her business at 9 o'clock, which is what time the cadets bring them. So we just told her, you know what, put them back in your store as long as you put them back out 3 hours before the street closes. We're fine with that. So we've tried to compromise wherever possible. We, as you know, we fence building to building as opposed to fencing along the curb, and the business owners seem that are in our footprint like that much better, because people can come and go in and out of their business without being obstructed by a fence. So they're seeing, the ones that are open are seeing their revenues increase on Thursday nights.
And on this year's, with working on the street closures and working with the business owners, have you held any more meetings between the business owners and Summer Nights Board?
We have not had any formal meetings. We've just actually went to their businesses individually so that they could speak freely. And when we are aware of an issue, which a couple have come up that Lieutenant Eisenbraun or the chief have brought to my attention, we go and talk to that particular business owner specifically about their issue.
So no formalized meetings, but you've got good communications going between the Summer Nights Board and the business owners downtown?
Correct, we believe so.
Do you plan on giving this presentation Monday at 10 a.m.?
I certainly can if you'd like me to.
I believe that the other half of the council would appreciate the update as well, just to get it on the record and everything.
Sure.
And then also, Sandy, the other question I had for you is, there was something written in the contract, and I've just heard, I'm a little sketchy on this as far as what I recall, but something to do with the Summer Nights was supposed to contribute a portion or a monetary donation to the downtown, and I didn't know if it was the Downtown Bid Board or if it was some other association, but I heard that that's not being done. Do you have an update on what that looked like, or?
Yes. That agreement was between the Summer Nights Board of Directors and the RCDA's Board of Directors. But as you know, the RCDA is now part of Destination Rapid City. And so our legal counsel said we need we had a memorandum of understanding between the two groups, which was about a contribution to their organization and volunteer help to our organization. But when they were dissolved, then that memorandum of understanding was also dissolved. And so we sent a correspondence to Destination Rapid City requesting a new memorandum of understanding with the new organization, which looks different than the one that we made our agreement with.
And when did that dissolve?
About a month after we made the agreement last in 2015. We signed the agreement in April of 2015, and then the RCDA was not necessarily dissolved. It's not a board in and of itself. It's now a committee of Destination Rapid City. So the person that we signed that agreement with was no longer a part of the organization, and that happened, I believe, in May or June of 2015.
Okay, so that was well past a year ago, and so there's
Correct.
been no memorandum of understanding between the two?
No, there has not.
Has there been a desire, are both parties satisfied of not doing a memorandum of understanding at this point then?
No, I think we need a new one, but we sent a correspondence to Dan and requested a proposal or a new one, and we're willing to look at anything that they would propose to us.
Oh,
As a
okay.
board.
All right, so are you still working on it
So the door's
then?
still open, correct?
Okay, all right. Thank you. I think that answers the questions I have. I do know that the other council members would appreciate if you can be available on Monday and remember, it's 10 a.m., it's not 6.
I will make myself available.
Thank you. I'll yield the floor.
Thank you. Alderman Wright, you have the floor.
Thank you, and I would appreciate your update on Monday also. And this issue with the cooperation with DRC and so forth, can you be a little more specific on Monday and where we're at? It sounds like you haven't had a meeting. It sounds like you should have had a meeting. So let's try and get some communication going between now and Monday is how we're going to resolve that issue, okay?
Well, we did send communication, Jerry. We haven't had a response to our communication.
I'll be expecting some discussion on that on Monday. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Mr. Laurenti, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and if I can, I'd like to ask Sandy Schwan a few questions. If I can,
Absolutely.
please. Actually, I have some comments first, but and those comments are the fact that my wife and I have been down there 2 or 3 times this summer, and it's been a wonderful event. We've really enjoyed it. I wanted to thank you for putting this on and for your team and all the work that they do, and the fact that it is only a revenue generator for the city rather than a huge cost. I understand the police also like it because it's a good interaction for them with the public. At least our previous chief of police made that very statement. But I just want to thank you for what you're doing with Summer Nights and your presentation. My question to you is, being halfway through the 3 years, have you thought about, and I'm sure that you have, I'm asking a question that I'm sure you already have some answers for, which is, how does Summer Nights get better? How does it get better?
Well, it depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about how the business owners view it or the public. The business owners, I think it gets better when we shorten our setup and our tear down time, which was the reason for the investment in the beverage equipment, which was a significant investment. But it should, as we get used to how it works, cut our setup and tear down time significantly. So we won't be closing their streets, and which we do acknowledge can inconvenience their local customers. As far as the patrons, I think it's just about maintaining a safe environment and a family-friendly environment. As we get used to keeping the major artery, St. Joe, open later in the day, we have figured out ways to still add back in some of those family-friendly elements. We clearly aren't going to be able to put a jumping castle up because that's a time-consuming thing, and our jumping castle girl moved to Chicago. But we'll still be able to, we've added in, the caricature guy has come, the balloon gentleman's come. We've got a gentleman that does this really neat gyroscope ride for kids that can get in and out really quickly. This week, the Rapid City Journal is going to come with a photo booth. So we're gradually, as we learn how to use that street and set up quickly, we should be able to add back in some of that family-friendly element, which, you know, can change an event in terms of if it's all we have is a band and beverages, it can turn from a family-friendly event to more of a beer event, and that's not what we wanted. We always wanted to be something that people were comfortable bringing their children to and enjoying some live music.
No, and I think you're there. I mean, obviously, wherever people have a choice about being able to get alcohol, whether it's from your event or from the businesses that serve it down there, there are always people who make bad decisions. I don't think that's anything with any of this conversation, and I have seen the gyroscope. However, we usually leave the Y after a workout to go to summer nights, and I haven't had the guts to jump in that gyroscope yet. So I don't know that I would be able to do it and keep everything within myself.
Well, we haven't had anybody lose their food yet, so that was one of our concerns. That's why they're right by a storm drain.
I could probably set a precedent on that. And one last comment, and I just wanted to verify that what I heard from you is that this memorandum of understanding, which makes sense to me because that group is no longer there, they're part of the Destination Rapid City group, that door's been opened by you. Is that correct?
Correct. We sent a letter to Dan Seffner saying that we just need to find a new agreement and specify how that money is going to be spent.
So what I'm hoping, Sandy, is that since you've opened the door, that will either be taken advantage by Destination Rapid City, and I don't believe, honestly, that it's something you need to bring to the meeting. It sounds like you've opened that door. It sounds like that opportunity needs to be seized or does not. I'm not asking you to answer that question. I'm making that statement. So I appreciate your time, and I appreciate your staff and what they do for our city. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lorente. Alderwoman Scott, you have the floor again.
Thank you, Chair. May I ask Mr. Dan Seffner if he's willing to answer a couple questions?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Dan, you know the drill. Name?
Dan Seffner, Destination Rapid City, downtown.
Thank you. Dan, it's been a while since we've seen you before us, so just since you're in the audience today, just wanted to let you weigh in on this too. Since it's been 18 months and that committee or subcommittee disband or is no longer available, and the letter that Summer Nights Board sent out to you over last year, is there a reason it's taking so long to come up with another memorandum of understanding?
Obviously, Sandy and I need to communicate, and we've worked together in the past for many years. I have asked Sandy, I've got a few emails that I'll pull back up, that we get into discussion on this, and maybe that's communication on both of our parts that have not come together. But Sandy and I have worked together a lot in the past, so we need to resolve this and get to an agreement and move forward and get it done. We support Summer Nights. We're behind Summer Nights. We've worked with them. We've been team leaders together many, many, many times. Again, maybe I have a little misunderstanding. Maybe Sandy does. But some agreements need to be made, and it needs to be brought forward, and it needs to be done very quickly. It really does. So again, I think we have some miscommunication, and that's what I'm looking at right now.
So it sounds to me like you both are in agreement of working on this, and you guys should be able to resolve this fairly quickly. And
yes, and I will double check when I get back to the office, but we have sent Sandy information on our downtown marketing. We have a downtown marketing plan. We spend roughly $30,000, Carly, a year in downtown marketing. That's part of our downtown business group. We have 210 members. 5 years ago, we had 35. I just might add that. I can remember being on the downtown group when we had 8. We now have 210 members. We do weekly newsletters. We do updates. We do a lot of things for downtown. It's obviously our life. It's what we do. It's our lifeline. So we will be in communication, and we will revise this and make sure that it happens and gets done.
all right.
And report back to you.
Any other comments you'd like to, since I brought you up to the podium? Sandy gave a really nice, anything that you'd like to update on Summer Nights? It seems to be going very well.
It does seem to be going very well. I've had this year far less complaints. As a matter of fact, hardly any as far as the street closures, where a few years ago when we were closing at 3 o'clock, there were a lot of people banging the doors and it was a little difficult. But right now, I always say in my office when someone says, why everybody's complaining. I said, is that one person or two? How many are really complaining? You know, is it 50 or 100 or is it one or two? So right now, truly, it's been one or two, but it's been very minimal. So it's been really good, and I think it's great for downtown.
Great, all right.
Thank you very
Dan.
much.
I yield the floor.
Thank you. And I don't know if we have a motion on 12 yet?
Motion to acknowledge.
All in favor? All opposed? 12 passes. Mayor's item 13, number LF 072716-05, request to eliminate rapid ride public transportation fee for K through 12 students. And the floor is open, and the mayor is going to speak. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. A couple weeks ago, I wrote the council a letter, and that really explains everything I can explain about this. I'm asking for your support to amend the fee schedule to allow us to implement this program, which I think will be very beneficial to Rapid City. One of the things that's hard for me as a mayor, I've been mayor for a year now. I was never mayor before that. And so it's hard for me to spend too much time talking about something. And one of the things, there are several things that we spend a lot of time talking about in this community. One of those things is protecting our future workforce or workforce development. And we have a city, whereas 72 or 74,000 people is a relatively small or mid-sized city in this country. It's 55 square miles, which is really very large for a town our size. I grew up in a town that was about 8 square miles, and you could ride your bike anywhere. There are some barriers to getting around in this town. I think this proposed plan will seek to remedy those, to encourage mobility in our school-age kids, K through 12, and get them to experience and appreciate and benefit from the city's resources. I think in doing that, we have a greater chance to, when they come out the other end of school, to produce viable workers for the type of developments we're seeking. And so rather than study this for a year or two and make sure we're exactly right about it, I propose that we adjust the fee schedule, implement the program immediately, have a checkup around the Christmas break to see how things are going, work out any kinks, do a full evaluation of the program at the end of the school year to see if it's something that we view as beneficial, how it's being accepted by the public, and so on. So I think that would be a very great benefit to Rapid City. So the cost of it, the federal government through grants and also the state to some extent split the costs with us. So really the costs have to be realized before they're split. So therefore, we can only estimate what the cost to the taxpayers will be to implement this program. And based on that, it's a total reduction, an estimated total reduction of about $32,000, something in that neighborhood, which then will be subsidized by the federal government. So Rapid City public transit budget will go up approximately $16,000, or about 3%. Currently, the funding for transit, the total cost of the program is $2,583,000. $1.75 million is paid by the federal and state grants, and they earn $425,000 in fares and advertising, and the general fund subsidizes $491,000. So those are the costs. I'll be happy to report on the benefits at a later time. But I do believe in this program. I think it would be well worth it and a good way to enhance the youth of our community. One question you might have is, are we really going to let a kindergartner on the bus? Well, we do now. It's just that most parents won't let their kindergartner on the bus. But if today, if a kid with a 6-year-old with a $1.50 came to a bus stop, he'd be allowed on the bus. And so none of that's changing. We still encourage parents to oversee their kids and not send them on a bus ride all by themselves if they're not capable of getting off at the right stop and so on. But I'll stand for any questions you might have.
And Alderwoman Amanda Scott, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. So, Mayor, it sounds like if I go back, and I believe in the letter that you sent each one of us, you kind of listed out 12 to 15 points of why Rapid City really offers a public transportation system to start with. And it seems to me that this would also help encourage the whole purpose of putting in that public transportation, and that is to maximize the public transportation and try to reduce the individual cars. I won't say bicycles, because people who are walking and bicycling, we're trying to encourage that as well, but to reduce those individual cars out there. So do you know if the current public transportation system, is it 50% occupied, roughly 75? I mean, are the buses pretty much going around where if we could encourage this, we've got a lot of room to take in this growth before we'd ever have to look at adding to the existing route structure?
Yeah, I can't give you a percentage or exact numbers on ridership, but there's well enough room for this in the transportation manager's opinion. And yeah, you're right. I didn't talk about the benefits, the public transportation benefit, but I think that's our duty to encourage public transportation. And of course, what you're going to hear from the Puma team here in a minute is that people who are wanting to move into downtown are different people. They think different than I do. And so they don't want to have a car if they don't have to. They want to be within walking distance of places and so on. And so the public transportation is a very good option for cities like ours. And over time, if you take a few steps back and look at the big picture, we had an increase in public transportation for a while, and it's plateaued. So we want to encourage it. So when these K through 12 customers get through this program, they will have eliminated the stigma of public transportation. They'll become comfortable with it. It may become a part of their life, and for them and their friends and so on. So when they're out of the 12th grade, we'll have more paying customers and hopefully a greater sustainability on our program.
And Mayor, I'm not really sure, but I believe that the school district's busing system buses children that are outside a 3 mile. Does our public transportation go outside that 3 mile? Is this going to compete against that? Will this allow the school district to reduce some of their busing?
No, I don't believe so. Currently, there's two special custom bus routes that are paid by parents of the students to take a bus to St. Elizabeth Seton, I believe, and also to Southwest Middle School. Those routes will be the same. Those routes won't convert to a free route. Those were custom. That takes personnel and equipment to accomplish that route. So, but anyone else in town near a bus stop who can walk to a bus stop will be able to take advantage of this. And I know in speaking with now 3 school superintendents over time about this type of a program, that initially when the school year starts, the public transportation bus passes for kids spikes, and a few months into the school year it goes back down to where it was before, and that in many ways mimics the attendance rate also. So when it gets to be 0 degrees out and you don't have a good coat and you live half a mile away, you may not go to school that day. And as we know, and she would testify to if she were here, the school as a superintendent, every missed day of school increases your chances of getting behind and ultimately failure. So we're trying to help out with that. I wouldn't bill this as a magic pill for the school attendance, but I do believe it's going to be an improvement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll yield the floor.
Thank you. And Alderman Wright, you have the floor.
Mayor, a couple of questions from people that have called me is, this would be for all students, all days and all times, correct? And also, would it be possible that college students could be included?
Well, I think it's best if we start K through 12 at this moment. We know what we're getting into with that group of folks. It would be year-round to answer your questions. And I think there are other, we should be open for possibilities in the future. I think we would have to spend some time analyzing that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Alderman Lorente, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mayor, I like the idea. I have a few questions for you based on your letter. And my questions to you are, and I think you just answered one of them. I was wanting to ask you about the dates, if it was going to be just for the calendar school year. Is the cost that we have here, $32,000 per year, is that for an entire calendar year, or is that during school year? Are those specific student passes that they're purchasing and they're only good during the school year, the $32,000 figure?
I don't believe I can answer that. I'll have to figure that out before Monday and answer it then.
Okay. And then the projected, which would have some effect on the projected net loss of $16,000, is that going to be something that will be, because we're talking about FY16 using FY16 general funds. So my question to you is, how will we cover that net loss for FY16?
Well, the federal government will, of course, pay their half of it. The rest we'll have to see. We'll have to see what the books say at the end of this year. Ridership may have been up enough in 16, and we don't know that yet, so that there's no loss. Ridership could be down, and there could be a little greater loss, but I believe we'll be able to find it.
Okay, and then this is my own personal opinion. I would hope that maybe, and I'm asking you for this, in your letter you put that you're recommending an evaluation. Just from my perspective, I like to see words like there will be an evaluation rather than a recommendation for an evaluation over the Christmas break, and that there will be a first-year experiment evaluation in June of 2017. So I'm just asking for that. And then the other thing that I wanted to ask you about is, how will we measure the success of this particular program? If we approve the rate change, how will you at Christmas, during Christmas break, and then at the end of the school year, be able to say whether this was successful or not?
Well, I think the one objective measurement will be school attendance. The other measurements, I think, would be in the volume of ridership within that age group. So I say if there's a 25% or 50% increase in the K through 12 age riders, then I say that that is a success in and of itself, and we will probably not be able to measure with the destinations of those folks as far as the library or other events.
So along those lines, I guess what I want to be able to do in December and June as a council member, this is me personally, of course, is to be able to look at data, because we have data today that says we have X number of student passes, they're generating X amount of revenue. We know this today. So we're going to change the program. What I want to know is, and you're saying ridership increases, but how will we know that K through 12 has increased? Will there still be a pass that they'll have to apply for and get? Because otherwise, how will we know the number?
That's a good question. I'd like to leave all that up to Rich Sagan, who I think has already been in contact with some other communities who do this type of thing.
Okay.
And I mean, we understand and respect your need for some proof that this is moving in the right direction, and we'd be glad to provide that. So I recommended the evaluation periods to you. That's what's on my mind, and I'll say right now that I wouldn't do this without an evaluation period, both on the school break and after school.
Of course.
Makes good sense. It's an investment of the taxpayers, and we want to make sure it's doing what we think it will do.
Right, and that's what I'm drawing at, is the evaluations mean nothing if we have nothing to evaluate. So I'm hoping that maybe Monday night we'll have something a little more concrete. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, and Alderwoman Scott, you have the floor again.
I'd like to make the motion to approve the recommendation to eliminate the rapid ride public transportation fee for K through 12 for, well, that's it. And then if I can retain the floor?
Absolutely.
May I ask Wade Nyberg a question or two? Wade, So the mayor is asking the city council for just simply to change the fee schedule, which is a resolution. There's no second reading, there's no first reading. And by the city council doing this fee schedule, I believe the city council separated out from all the ordinances so that the city council can, even if we changed our mind 2 days from now, not suggesting we're going to, but we could go back and rechange the fee schedule again. I mean, just approving this at this time, and I believe in the mayor's letter, he also indicated that after we do that evaluation at Christmas time or anything else, we're not setting a specific date that this fee schedule is being approved for. We have the flexibility to change that fee schedule again at any time that we want to bring it back up and change it again.
That's correct. Yep, it's a single reading or a single motion, just one action by the council.
So on the fee schedule, just so that the public knows, Wade, if city council on Monday goes ahead and approves this, when does it have to then also wait the 20 days that a normal ordinance would have to wait before it takes effect?
Generally speaking, there are a few exceptions to that, and I can look at that ahead of Monday night to see if that would be included, but generally speaking, most ordinances and resolutions go to publication and then they're effective 20 days after publication.
Thank you. The only reason I was saying that is I know the mayor is looking for this to take effect before the next public school year, and I'm sure there's probably going to be some education pieces that want to go out, so I was just looking for the timing of this.
Okay.
Thank you. I yield the floor.
Thank you. And Alderman Lorente, you have the floor again.
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to quickly say that, Mayor, I appreciate the idea, and I am going to temper my approval at committee level with the hopes that we get some more information. I don't want to see, like we've seen with other things that government does, where we aren't thinking about or putting effort into how we're going to determine whether this is successful or not, because it is going to be an increased cost to the taxpayer. So I want to make sure that we have solid data. We tried to do this with Compass, and I warned many, many times. It's germane because we have tried to do things as government without having data in front of us to evaluate its success or its need for improvement or the need to get rid of it. So I'm hoping that we will have this type of thing in place for this so that we don't repeat history on this particular type of thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lorente. No other speakers, so all in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. Item 14 from Community Planning and Development, number 16CA003, acknowledge, report, and presentation of Downtown Area Master Plan draft.
Good afternoon, Sarah Hansel, Long Range Planning. Item number 14 is a presentation of the draft Downtown Area Master Plan. This is a project that the city has been working on in partnership with the Business Improvement District, Destination Rapid City, and many, many civic partners over the course of the last year. So after doing many months of analysis and stakeholder engagement, we have arrived at the draft plan. This is a document you all have a copy of. We are in the process of collecting public comment on the plan. We've had 3 open houses in the last 2 weeks and have also presented to Planning Commission, Public Works Committee, and now Legal Finance Committee. So we're excited to give you this presentation of the plan this afternoon and then take any comments and feedback that you have for us moving forward. Just to give you a heads up about the timeline, we are looking at making revisions to this plan and bringing the final plan back at the end of September, early October. So with that, I will hand it over to Brad Siegel. He's with Progressive Urban Management Associates, the lead consulting firm working with our community on this project.
Good afternoon, council members. It's a delight to be back in Rapid City. Our firm has been working here now. It was a year ago that we were actually selected through a competitive process to work with city staff and leadership on the downtown plan. Today I'm going to walk you through about a 10 to 12 minute overview of highlights, and then I'm assuming we'll have as much time as you'd like for questions related to the plan. Sarah mentioned that you've all been provided with the planning document, which includes a whole variety of recommendations related to how Rapid City could help shape more investment and more prosperity in its downtown over the next 5, 7, 10, 15 years. Our study area has looked at the core of downtown, the historic core, also the School of Mines, and north up to the Civic Center. We have, part of this plan, we've put together a market assessment to look at different market opportunities. So the intent here is to try to balance the planning concepts with some reality in the market as well. We've looked at different trends that are affecting not only Rapid City, but affecting other downtowns. We've looked at local market dynamics. We've talked to a lot of players, major employers, developers, businesses, interested citizens, a whole variety of folks. In terms of market opportunities, we do see that the most prominent market opportunity over this investment cycle really is housing. We see pent-up demand for a downtown housing product. There are a variety of different segments in the community that could fill that, primarily younger individuals, 20 to 35. That demographic is moving into downtown areas nationally, and we see evidence of that locally. People like myself, older boomers, empty nesters, are also attracted to this. Importantly, when we talk to some of your major employers, Regional Health, Black Hills, they mention that this is a employee recruitment issue for them. That when they're recruiting physicians, when they're recruiting top-level professionals to move into Rapid, the availability of housing in downtown is certainly an issue, particularly when they're asking physicians and others to move from other markets. Other market opportunities, we saw a lot of opportunity for new job production, new office development, new creative space. You're seeing this happen in the east of 5th District, which is a very large focus of the plan. Limited opportunity on hotel, although perhaps another boutique hotel could be absorbed in the market. And certainly retail. Rapid is fortunate that you've got pretty strong downtown retail, and we see some opportunities for adding to that mix. As Sarah mentioned, we've been conducting open houses the last couple of weeks. It's sort of the last round of community outreach that goes back over the 10-month process for the plan. More than 1,800 inputs into this plan through open houses, roundtable discussions, online surveys. I think we're pleased to report that over the last week we've had almost 100 folks filter into these open houses, and would suggest that about 95% of the concepts in the plan have been warmly received. That means maybe 5 to 10% of the concepts are perhaps a little more challenging. We can certainly talk about that today. Top priorities that we've heard from the community, very much in sync with the market assessment that we talked about. Housing is on the top of everybody's agenda in terms of new housing types downtown. Arts and culture, this plan's timing dovetailed nicely with the completion of the community's cultural plan within the last year. Safety, a top issue with downtown, and this is as much perception as it is reality. So concerns about lighting, is there adequate lighting? Some concerns about loitering, panhandling, but certainly safety remains an issue among many of the residents that we talked about. You'll see the plan address issues such as connections, how do we get around downtown, employment, how do we attract more jobs, investment, parking continues to be an issue, and I have been in this business for about 30 years. I got started in Denver. I worked in the lower downtown area there. I've worked in about 200 downtowns, and I would say parking pops up probably in 198 of those 200 downtowns. So there are some parking issues here. The good news is we see some tangible solutions to really help parking here. Key streets we're looking at, mixed-use development, how that can be encouraged. Also Mines. Mines has been a great player and partner in this planning process, and certainly the new president at Mines, she is very, very interested in how do we connect the school more to downtown in a variety of ways. The plan itself is anchored by core values. These 5 different values, really everything we're suggesting links back to trying to achieve these values for downtown. So livable, how do we help make downtown more of a livable downtown, take advantage of this market opportunity to create housing? Prosperous, downtown is first and foremost the center of commerce for this region. So how do we continue to attract jobs, and also on retail, how do we help existing businesses do the best they can, and also new businesses move down there? Active, how do we activate downtown? I should mention to you that Rapid City has done some great things with downtown. Main Street Square, which I know was a topic of conversation earlier today, one of the best designed, activated downtown spaces that we have seen nationally. And honestly, we've been recommending other cities in the Midwest to take a look at Main Street Square. You've done a great job there. So how do we build on that and activate other spaces? Welcoming downtown, making sure it's safe, connected downtown. How do we make sure it's walkable, bikeable, and you get around downtown easily? In the plan itself, there are frameworks, design frameworks. In addition to our firm out of Denver, we worked with a design firm, Gould Evans, out of Kansas City. And so a lot of this framework came from them in terms of design concepts. The framework is both on the private sector side or development side and also on the public side. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on these frameworks, but I do want to point out some key items. One, when we started getting to work on this, we looked at downtown, and it's often planners will have a tendency to sort of carve up a downtown into a lot of districts. We carved you into two. So essentially east and west of 5th. West of 5th, the historic core of downtown and how that relates north to the Civic Center. And then east of 5th, not only the School of Mines, but the area between 5th and Mines we see as a great opportunity area. We're suggesting is an innovation district, which I'll go into some detail here in a minute. The development strategies from Gould Evans talks about different activity centers to try to stimulate within downtown. Certainly the Main Street one in the core of downtown is well developed. Also being sensitive to neighborhoods and the neighborhood edges. So on the southern end of this, the yellow areas, how do we reinforce the residential nature of what's already there? And for example, West Boulevard, we've heard loudly from neighbors in terms of protecting the historic district there. And in the last iteration of the draft plan, you will see some modifications there to ensure that, that the historic district certainly is respected in this plan. That's been our intent all along. And then north along Omaha, that really is a vehicular street first and foremost, and sometimes a plan is best when it doesn't change things. We don't see radical changes to the Omaha corridor and certainly have some ideas on how to maybe help make it work better and to improve connections to Civic Center, but it is first and foremost a vehicular corridor. We do provide some illustrative concepts within the plan to try to inspire the community on what these things could look like. This is the President's Plaza site, which is substantially under the city's control, and we've been looking at that. I realize Rapid's been looking at this for many, many years. The concept here is more of a mixed-use housing with a parking structure. This is how that looks. We actually think this would be appropriate and marketable density for that site, and what you're looking at is a concept that employs 4 or 5 stories of housing and apartments above ground floor retail. Behind that, on the left of the image, is actually a parking structure. We also think that's a great site, potentially, for an additional public parking structure, which we do think is needed in downtown and in the core. Another vision, if you will, for the future is that innovation district east of 5th. A lot of potential to try to stimulate small, innovative businesses there, work with mines in terms of testing different concepts. Rapid is fortunate. You have an ongoing pipeline of STEM talent coming out of that school. So how do we create some opportunities that they can actually work here? You're seeing evidence of this already with the garage, the co-working space that's been successful. They're expanding across the street. So in terms of planning that area, we looked at 3rd Street, which is on the slide. 3rd Street, which runs from the county center north. It's not a through street. We thought that some pretty exciting concepts could happen there. This image visualizes a future on 3rd Street with 2- and 3-story development, all of which we feel is marketable under current conditions. That is primarily housing on the upper floors, apartments to 2nd and 3rd story. First floor would not necessarily be retail, but would be more creative and workshop type space. Where people could make things, whether they're fabricating something or perhaps making beer or what have you. But these are all sort of elements of the type of innovation district that we think could thrive there. The plan goes on to look at beyond specific sites, but it looks at how we connect different attractions within downtown and also different public spaces. We've identified different street typologies. We don't think every street needs to accommodate a bike or pedestrian, but there are key streets that seem to make sense for that. For example, Kansas City currently is just a great street for bicycle traffic east and west through downtown. We do see some options for perhaps trying to slow the traffic on both Main and St. Joe. I did mention that some of the planning ideas have been a bit contentious, and this is where we've had some pushback in terms of Main and St. Joe. However, we will argue that currently the traffic speeds are much too high on those streets, that the 3-lane capacity is suitable, more than enough capacity. And part of what we're trying to do is actually slow that down a bit so that it would be better for retail, better potentially for future housing, and also for safety. Early in this process, we received a communication from your current police chief about concern of traffic speeds on those streets. So one of our ideas on that is actually to narrow those streets from 3 lanes to 2 lanes. We don't feel that would create congestion, although, again, we have had a little bit of pushback. And then we've had some other more aggressive ideas about parking on those streets, which we can talk about in the Q&A. So we illustrate some of these concepts in the plan. We illustrate what going from 3 lanes to 2 lanes would look like on those streets. We also look at key intersections. How do we get people across 5th? As it's perceived as a barrier, so how do we change that without necessarily changing the streets? And we've come up with some ideas on that as well. Trail connectivity. What a wonderful opportunity and a unique advantage Rapid City has with proximity to the Black Hills. Sarah mentioned earlier, I'm from Denver, so I'm from the Front Range. I understand proximity of a plain city next to the mountains, but you really have an amazing setting here that we certainly don't have in most of our Front Range cities. Design guidelines are provided. There are some options on this in terms of how we want to use design guidelines. They could be used in a regulatory way, or they could simply be used in an advisory way to try to promote different design of new development as it occurs. Lastly, and the last section of my presentation, we have a very detailed action plan. So we have about 60 different recommendations out of this plan. It would be a disservice of us to just throw 60 ideas at you. So the ideas have priorities and sequencing. There are ideas that are suggested for the short term. There's several that we call quick wins, which we think could happen fairly soon without much civic cost and make a difference. But the different ideas are sorted in these categories of economy, experience, and environment. Economy relates to attracting jobs, new investment. Experience is that experience of walking on the street, being on the street on a daily basis. Environment gets into the physical enhancements in the public realm, if you will. On the economy side, we've got a number of ideas on how to promote more housing, jobs, and innovation. Also, those linkages to the School of Mines, not just physical linkages, but also programming in terms of events, and also economic development in terms of promoting different business concepts. The experience action plan goes into arts and culture, building off the recent cultural plan. Parking management. We do have some suggestions on how the parking supply perhaps could be more effectively managed and also potentially increase revenue generation from that activity. Safe and clean, really getting to the basics and some quick ideas to help with perceptions of safety. Lastly, on environment, ideas on key streets. This is where our partners from Gould Evans really provided some fine-grained detail, if you will. Connections, gateways, and then lastly, land use and zoning. Zoning is perhaps, this is our list of quick wins. If there were 2 or 3 ideas that we would recommend for the city to pursue, we would put zoning changes at the top of it, particularly east of 5th. The zoning east of 5th goes back decades. I believe it goes back to commercial zoning that came up in the 50s and the 60s. It does not match the market potential of that area today. So the current zoning east of 5th really relates to more auto-related, suburban-related development patterns. It does not encourage building to the street, for example. It does not encourage, or in some cases allow, mixed use in terms of housing above commercial. Some of the parking requirements don't necessarily fit with the types of businesses or the demographics of the people who are attracted to downtown environments. So within the plan itself, we have provided a detailed 8 to 10 page memo on zoning modifications. This is something that, other than staff time, would not cost the city dollars, but we think could unlock investment potential east of Fifth. We're urging that that's a quick win. Other quick wins, tax abatement program. I know this is something that's been talked about with the county in the past. This is an incentive that we're suggesting be directed toward housing. We feel it could be more effective than tax increment financing to get housing, and frankly would be less expensive to both the city and the county to employ tax abatement, so we can certainly talk about that. Perhaps the other idea on this list that we think has urgency and is ready to go is the lighting plan. A lighting plan was put together by the Business Improvement District a couple of years ago. The design work, the cost has been done, it's ready to go. It certainly addresses the safety issue, which was a top concern that we heard from constituents. So last couple slides to wrap up the presentation. In terms of plan implementation, we also go into a fair amount of detail on different resources that could be employed to actually make these things happen. Some of these tools the city already has and is already deployed, so things like TIF you already have. We would argue that downtown certainly is if there's an appropriate place to use TIF, downtown and urban development should be at the top of the list. We do think that there's more opportunities on parking revenue. This notion of a tax abatement is on there. We're also looking at some private sector sources, private sector opportunities to leverage funds which have not been used in Rapid City before. So credit enhancements are on that list, and we have worked in other markets. We've talked about this with your large employers here, but we've worked in other markets where large employers, hospitals, other large employers have actually offered credit enhancements to get housing and other desirable types of development going. This could be through a lease guarantee or a loan guarantee with a property owner. So that's a little non-traditional. Crowdsourcing on small improvements. We have seen this actually used effectively where younger people in particular will pitch in on funding amenities. We've seen, for example, dog parks financed in other communities through an online appeal, and in some cases less than a week, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 been raised for those types of things. Lastly, on coordination, there are two items of coordination on this. One is the plan does suggest, and we have convened a coordinating council to move this forward, or coordinating committee, if you will. The coordinating committee is a lot of the different organizations that are involved in downtown management and development. Also, some of the larger employers in the region are involved in the coordinating committee, plus, of course, the city and county and other layers of government. The idea behind that is that group meets quarterly and gets an update on progress. And then lastly, on staffing, we are recommending to the city that the city consider designating a downtown planner within the planning department to actually pursue many of these ideas. We were told at the very beginning of this process, and I believe it was at the first city council meeting when we met with you, city was not interested in a pretty plan that would sit on a shelf and not much would happen. Our suggestion is that actually the downtown planner, the coordinating council, many of these tools, and also, of course, working in partnership with the Business Improvement District and Destination Rapid City, all of that together will be critical to actually moving these things forward. So my last thought for you is just timetable. This is moving forward. Council on Monday will be considering, I believe, accepting the draft plan, and then it goes through its final round of review as we get into September and into October. Sarah, any final thoughts? Okay. So thank you, and again, Council, I think we're available here as long as you want us for questions.
Alderwoman Scott, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. So thank you for the presentation. Most of the master plans that have been coming to City Council that are being incorporated and adopted into our comprehensive plan are spearheaded by community leaders that are already, they're the ones that are up here presenting. So I appreciate, and I will already tell you, I streamed your presentation yesterday as well. And I have read the draft. And this is a hard one for me. Number one, I probably get too much into the weeds. I did send a correspondence back to Sarah. Sarah, thank you for answering my questions to the best of your ability. My major concern with this plan, and like I said, it just may be my perception because I'm a detail-oriented person to start with. If it's going to be a master plan, and as you said, and I do appreciate a lot of the revenue funding structures, some of them I've never heard of. I'm really encouraged by that, especially encouraging some major employers in the area. I think that's great. I want to make sure, and I think I expressed this back to Sarah, and I included Wade Neidberg on my email back to them. A lot of this, as I read it, seems like it's the city and the city council and the city funding that is driving this. And to me, the downtown area is still private property and still needs to be driven by the property owners and those successful people down in the downtown area that are going to make this a vibrant entity and an organism and alive all on its own. We just, as you indicated, passed the cultural and arts plan into our comprehensive plan. And you know, Pepper Massey came in here and she was spearheading that and she was very on board. I am glad to see a few people from the downtown area in our audience today. So far, what I have not heard in the Planning Commission presentation or the Public Works yesterday or today is hearing their voice from the Downtown Bid Board, from Destination Rapid City, from the property owners down there, from the developers, from the major employers in our area, that they're on board, they see this. I haven't even really seen Ben Snow, and he really hasn't even talked about this either as far as an economic driver. But I really think, this is my city hat, this is not my business hat, this is my city hat. We really need, I really need as a city council member to see that this is going to be championed and taken over by the property owners and the people that are going to do this. I love the presentation, and I have visited with President Wilson, Heather Wilson, at the School of Mines and Technology, South Dakota School of Mines and Technology. She is very on board with trying to work with the city and the developers, and you know, I've encouraged her to bring back her alumni, to set up those businesses, to help with that incubator, and I think she really is looking for that private, government, public, you know, relationships and encouraging this. So Sarah's already heard my heartburn on this. I would not have a major issue with passing this as long as the public realizes that when there are key indicators or key action items in here that say near-term strategies, and a lot of them point to the city to do something, I don't think the city should be driving this. One of the examples I used was the tax abatement that you brought up. Thank you, Sarah. I was not aware that effective July 1st, the city of Rapid City can now offer a tax abatement for residential or for a home plan. It currently, unfortunately, is listed in the near future strategies, and what Sarah sent to me is there's some strings attached to that that I don't see happening within 12 months. I would almost put that down to up to your 5 years to get implemented, because since it was passed by the South Dakota State Senate, it will allow municipalities, including Rapid City, to do a tax abatement for our portion of property taxes only, and only for a housing program, which means we as a city have a lot of work to do with the city staff. They're going to have to develop a program, they're going to have to make sure it makes sense, then we have to put it into an ordinance, and then we have to get the ordinance passed. That does not happen overnight. So there are just some things, and I just want the public, I am very excited about this. I am very excited for the downtown, because unfortunately it's not in my ward. But I am very excited for the downtown and the downtown housing and businesses and making this just a lively organism. I just want to caution everybody, as far as I'm concerned, I won't speak for the rest of the city council, this needs to be driven by those people in the downtown area. So those were my comments. If you want to try to incorporate those, I know it was kind of a big picture thing. But
I'd love to respond just briefly too, because you're absolutely right. You know, a city cannot take this on and just do all this stuff. There's a lot of competing demands in a city, and there's a lot of things that the council needs to look at. And without a strong private sector partner, I'd agree with you that it's a pretty plan, and who knows what would happen with it. I will say that we've been working with Dan Sefner, who is a shy wallflower, but We have been working with Dan and his organization. They have actually financed part of this plan, and it's my understanding, when I think of implementation, I think of Dan as really representing a lot of what I think you were talking about in terms of the downtown, certainly in terms of the downtown private sector. Yeah. Okay. Great.
Yes, and Dan, go ahead and come up, and I'll pose that question to you. The other comment I wanted to make, and a lot of that, as you've already indicated, is already happening. The Rapid City Journal ran an article on Eric Braun, who happens to be our chairman of the Planning Commission right now for the city, and he's done a marvelous job with residential housing in the downtown area, and that's still an ongoing project that he's working on. So, Dan, if you could even make me feel a little bit better, because I haven't had an opportunity to ask Eric Braun about that. Has he participated in his comments?
Absolutely. Eric's been very much involved, and I was very much involved with Eric's project with the old Dusek building. I think we have to go back. I want to back up and just do a little bit of history, because maybe some of this is coming fast, even though, of course, I've been working on it for years, but you haven't. Is you take a look, this goes back to Mayor Quaker, and I started to take a look at our downtown central business district. The biggest part of this is zoning. The central business district was formed, and Sarah and I did some digging about in 1972. So not that that was a bad thing. It was right after the flood or somewhere around that area when we formed the central business district. Now, the zoning and the rules and the laws in the central business district are very different than across the railroad track, because the railroad track cuts it off. East of 5th Street is not in the central business district. So as you start moving around, this little central business district we have that was formed 40 years ago needs to be changed so we can advance and build and have more production going on east of 5th. So as we take a look at these properties, Amanda, making the difference here is zoning. Zoning is a really big issue. If you take a look at that chart, it obviously is about 3 times the size. But again, that was done 40 years ago. I moved here in 1974. Population was 36,000 or 35. Today we're 67, 68,000, somewhere in that area. So we've over doubled, but we've not increased the size of our central business district. A prime example that I must use is my own project, the Windsor Block that was done 7 years ago now. If I had not been in the central business district, I could not have done that project. There would have been no luxury lofts downtown because of parking restraints and requirements that are formed outside of the central business, which is general commercial. So what we really have to look at here, that's the key to success, not reaching to city to change some of the laws and the rules so it frees up private enterprise, people who want to do stuff, to go do it. I simplify this like a menu. When we go to a restaurant, we've got a menu of what we want to eat, what we want to select, what we want to drink, and so forth and so on. If we provide the correct menu for Kurt, Brad, the guys on the floor over here, and a builder, when he comes in and he says, we want to build this, 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 and this because that's what's approved, instead of them saying, well, you got to bring us a plan, or we can't do that, we can't do that, we can't do that. It's already listed that we can do it. This is what we want to build. Setbacks change. So you can build a building closer to the street, so you don't have 50 feet. So you have a different, like we have downtown. So I can put a property together and put 34 units in it and actually make it work and make it cash flow and make it blend and make it fit. We don't want a pink palace either. And make it fit. That's where some of the guidelines and that's where some of the things come into play for what we need to do in the future. Not going to City Hall for money or for funding. Like you have seen, as you take a look at our group, we came to City Hall and we did Main Street Square for Vision Funds. We split it, we did half, we did the rest. You did half, we did the rest. The whole block's been renovated since, we all know that. We take a look at Eric Braun's recent project. The other project that's going on right now, right across the street from Eric Braun, no city money involved. That property's been purchased. There's 4 new luxury lofts going in up there. As you take a look, the garage, you take a look at what's building, things that are going, things are really happening. That's the excitement. But we have to take some of the reins off so private business can come in with a checkbook and say, we can now build this. I can take a piece of land and make it work. So to kind of answer your question, I've given presentations to the Chamber Board, the Civic Center Board, the Young Professionals Group, and the list goes on and on and on. I bet I've been in front of 500 people, and I don't know how many public meetings we've had. I bet there's been 700, 800 people totally involved just in the public meetings. So the driver behind this, Amanda, is changing some of the rules that we've had in the city and expanding that central business district so we can jump the track, for example. Jump the track and watch the growth and see the next 5 years what we've watched the last 5 years. That's the purpose behind this, and truly I've studied it. And of course, started with Brent Limbaugh. It's too bad I lost him and he moved on us. He was a key factor and a very sharp individual, but Sarah's picked up the ball and we've really got it rolling and it's moving in a very positive direction. So it's not asking for money and funding, it's asking for permission for building and growth.
Thank you, Dan, for that explanation, and thank you. I'm so glad you were here today because seriously, the voice from the downtown area is the voice that I've been missing. I mean, I hear from Sarah and I hear from other staff members, and Sarah is a huge champion of this project. She's got a lot of information, but I appreciate hearing the voice from downtown.
Yeah, we believe me, there has been 100% support. The question I get is why wouldn't anybody want to do this? Truly, that is what I've been asked many times. And obviously, I'm familiar with every single business owner downtown.
Well, I believe the city can change and look at zoning, and we can take a look at that. That is within our bailiwick. So
Yep, that's right. That's our
and the
growth
only other
potential.
question I have for you, Dan, is what do you have against pink?
Well,
that was rhetorical. I'll yield. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Alderman Wright.
Thank you. I just want to make a comment in that my perspective is a little different than Amanda's, or Councilwoman Scott's, in that I think that we as a council of 10, and our involvement as a city is imperative and important for success of this program because we represent not just the public, but we also represent the private side. And I think we do need to be more progressive and open-minded in how we can get some things done. And I agree the zoning is one issue that we need to talk about, but there's infrastructure within this area that we own, and we're going to have to figure out how we're going to upgrade that to meet the demands of the development that will hopefully occur. And I think we need to all work together, and I often, because I'm a native of this community, I remember the grade schools that were built here in the 1950s and the swimming pools. I mean, there are monstrous numbers of them, and we have not done a significant similar building to recently anyway, but of course we grew then. I think we're kind of at a point in our community's time in history where we're preparing probably for a significant growth period, potential. And are we ready for it? And I think the message that needs to come out with this plan is that this is a plan for the entire, this is just a part of the comprehensive plan, which is for the entire community. And I think we as a community need to sit back, all of us, all 67,474 or whatever it is on the sign right now, and think about what do we want to do and how can we get this done. Now, if we're going to improve streets and we're going to improve utilities, we have to fund them. And what's the best way to do it? And what do we have available to do it? And we need to work together. But this body, along with probably the school board and some other bodies like the county commission, but particularly this body, is kind of the hearing base. They're the quarterback sort of decision makers for a lot of things that happen. And we've got a lot of work ahead of us. But I think as a community, we need to reinvent our attitude of how we're going to proceed the next 5, 10, 20, 40 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Wright. Do we have a motion on this? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes. Now item 15 under City Attorney's Office, number LF 06116-10A, introduction and first reading of ordinance number 6122, adopting section 16.090 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, requiring registration of vacant residential properties. And Alderwoman Scott, you have the floor.
Thank you. May I ask a question of Jessica Rogers from the City Attorney's Office, please? Yes, you may. Thank you. Jessica, when I was reading all over this, I did not go in and actually read the attachment. Does this introduction and first reading not contain subsection D? Was that
Correct.
removed?
We removed that subsection D entirely.
Thank you. And I am in full support of this now. If any of my peers want to make a motion to approve, I am on board approving it now that subsection D has been removed. Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Item 16, number LF 071316-06, second reading and recommendation of ordinance number 6132, an ordinance to modify the procedure for approval of vision account projects by amending section 3.16.090 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. And Alderwoman Scott, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to approve and retain the floor if I can get a second.
Thank you.
And may I ask Wade Neidberg a question, please, Chair?
You may.
Thank you. Wade, since we are approving this and the project time period in which the City Council is going to be accepting applications needs to be specified, would you recommend that on Monday we can go ahead and also split this and make that recommendation that we are accepting applications for projects for the 2017 half of the Vision Fund at that time, or would you like to see that today?
Well, I think Monday's fine. I think that that's what the mayor brought forward, and that was kind of everyone's understanding and how it's been advertised. But I think, yeah, if you want to split this into two action items on Monday, I don't think that. It might be better to do it now, I guess, just so we can have it on the agenda as a separate item with public notice.
If it's okay, Alderman Laurenti's weighing in. I'll yield the floor.
Alderman Laurenti, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd like to make a motion to split the item on the agenda. The first part of that being the approval of the formation of the committee, and the second, the approval of moving half of the vision funds for this committee to entertain with particular projects that come from the city or from the public. Thank you.
Second to split the motion.
Second to split the motion? Okay. So we'll bring the first one forward first. All in favor? Correct?
Yes, just for clarification, the first one is the actual approval of the second reading as listed on the agenda today. That's the approval that we're seeking.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. And the second one will be to, you want to clarify that too?
The second one would be to set that the program plan, that the applications for projects are being set for the 2017 vision funds, which the mayor has indicated is roughly $6.5 million or half the vision funds.
Thank you. So now that they've been clarified, we have a motion on the first one. So I don't see any more. Does anyone want to speak on the first part of the motion? Okay, then we will vote on it. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? First part of the motion passes. The second part of the motion, do we have a motion on that? Yes, you made and you seconded. So all in favor? Aye. All opposed? The motion and the split motion both pass. Thank you. Item 18, item 17, number LF 071316-07, second reading and recommendation of ordinance number 6133, an ordinance to update the contracting authority delegated to department directors by amending section 3.04.090 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, and Alderwoman Modrick, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an opportunity to speak on this, having just come from Pierre with some training that was done, and it went specifically to this for other communities to bring this forward and make sure that we're adjusting. So I think it's a great opportunity for us as well to get this contract up to what the state has provided, and getting this amendment in so that it can delegate the department directors to the allowance up to $50,000 on their bidding process, noting that I had learned as well that it's $25,000 for office products, just in case it's not clarified, but $50,000 on the bidding. Right. They just trained us on that in Pierre.
And we have, I will let our finance officer speak if she'd like.
It used to be 25,000 on equipment and anything else other than infrastructure, and 50,000 on infrastructure, and the state statute was changed, so it's just a flat 50,000 period.
May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So just to verify, and it wasn't office equipment, they left that under the equipment process, whether it was large equipment or office equipment, but it was for office products, and they said to be sure that we understand the defined difference between an office product and the office equipment, or the equipment in general that we're putting out there that we don't have to bid.
I will do a little more
Check on
research,
that.
because that's the information I got both from the statute and then also from DLA, or not DLA, but Municipal League. So I'll look.
Thank you, Pauline, and thank you, Alderwoman Modrick. And now, Alderwoman Scott.
I'd like to make a motion to approve and retain the floor if I can get a second.
Yes.
Thank you. And then just for clarification, may I ask Wade or Pauline, either one, a question on this? Yes? Wade, on this second motion, since Pauline already spoke. Basically, this is written so that it just simply says the city of Rapid City will do what is mandated at the state level at this point. So there really isn't a dollar figure at this point from what I read?
Right. We changed the other ordinances. There was one subsection that was missed at that time that had $25,000 written into it. And so we're updating that to match everything else so that it's basically automatic with the bid limits. If it doesn't need to be bid up to that limit, the department directors can contract for that.
So all dollar amounts have been removed from this so that it just simply says, as the state makes changes to this, the Rapid City will match what the state is saying. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Thank you. And Alderman Wright, you have the floor.
Just to clarify, this is for what we used to call informal bids. Anything over 50,000 requires bidding according to statutory law of public advertising and all that, correct? So they still will have to take 2 to 3 bids to award on an informal basis, correct?
Yeah, we still have a requirement in there for quotes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. And we have a motion, so all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Now, item 18, number LF 072716-10, discussion regarding 2K 2016 Dove Family Fair Freestyle Motocross event. And no speakers? Oh, Alderwoman Modrick.
I just want to speak on our side. We do have citizens that are in the room. We've had some documentation that's come before us. They deserve the acknowledgement as well because it is a neighborhood, low-density residential. And I went back and studied and followed the videos of 2013, followed the statements that were made, the clarifications. There were statements in there that we were going to identify this and maybe work on this so that we didn't have this again in the future. And we're here again 3 years later with a neighborhood that is still feeling that they're going to have an effect on their neighborhood if there's events that are extreme in nature, different than what is the standard uses that we used to consider on our permits. And so a couple of questions that I have. I know we're dealing off of use and review of 1987, and I just want to clarify, does a use and review of 1987 automatically move into a conditional use permit, or is it because of labeled as a church, it is automatically conditional use permit? Just to, again, clarify where we go out of the low residential and move this into use and review or that, if I could ask Wade that.
Absolutely.
Sure. The use on review from 1987, basically it was a similar process. It's the equivalent of a conditional use permit. If it was called something different then, that's basically what it is. There's a list of permitted uses that you don't need a permit. You don't need city approval to build a single-family residential home. You need a building permit, and you need to follow the rest of the ordinances. But if they're the use of the property is in the conditional use list, then you need to come and ask, basically present what you're doing and get approval from the Planning Commission and council if necessary to get a conditional use permit.
So to follow up to answer, get an answer, clarification on that question then, was there a need to do an additional conditional use permit because it had changed and so the review matter is back in review?
No, I think that the use on review, it was basically a conditional use permit was granted back in '87 for a church. That's when they first built it and they did some other improvements were required as conditions of that permit. They've been operating as a church since then, so there's not really a need to renew. There's a 2-year expiration, or there was at some point in time. I don't have it right in front of me, but that's if they would have gotten the permit and not done anything within 2 years, the approval would have expired, or if they stopped being a church for 2 years, the permit would have expired and they'd had to reapply.
So if I just could add then, you know, what we're dealing with when we talk about zoning and ordinances and permits, and these are like fences, it makes for good neighbors. And 3 years ago, I think the neighborhood felt like, from the discussion from the council, that this was a one-time major event that was going to have high traffic. As conditional uses state, existing traffic and traffic to be generated by the purposes of the effect of noise, odor, smoke, dust, air, water pollution, the degree of control, and the imposed mitigation possibilities. And so those things, you know, again fall into from 2013 to 2016. And how do we, as a council, address that so that we don't have a neighborhood coming before us every year, no matter what the event is? 2,000 in attendance, that's pretty healthy attendance for a small neighborhood, low residential, with only one entrance and exit. And, you know, so is there just like no limits? Because there is property rights on both sides of the fence. There's property rights for those that are in the neighborhood, and there's property rights for those that are doing the good works of our community and bringing God forward. So we need that fence so that everybody's happy on both sides. And that's what I think we need to make sure we clarify now, because we're going to be back here again in 2017, 2018, 2019. And then it may explore. 2013, I think, Wade, you had the opportunity of saying this could also end up becoming something that other event holders could do, and we wouldn't have any control of that either. It could explode into citywide. And I'll end at that.
Thank you. Alderman Wright, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask if it's appropriate that this will be back on our agenda on Monday at 10 a.m. and that the Attorney's Office be prepared to brief the council in its entirety what we can and should not do in this issue and what appropriate authority we have. Just kind of give us and the public information that how this can be handled. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Alderwoman Scott.
Thank you, Chair. May I ask Wade Neidberg a question?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Wade, just for clarification too, because I believe the City Attorney's Office has already sent all the City Council members their opinion on what the City Council can or cannot do with this issue, and I believe that that's what's prompted this item to just simply be a discussion item to be acknowledged by the City Council at this time. In looking at the zoning ordinances, rules, and regulations and what's already in place, the City Council cannot go against property right ownership or property ownership rights. And so since this, as Alderwoman Modrick indicated, it's trying to put up that good fence or tearing down a fence to make a good neighborhood and good neighbors. Unfortunately, here's my final question, Wade, I'm finally getting to it. Mm-hmm. At this point, since the City Council cannot intervene at this point, unfortunately it becomes a civil case, doesn't it? Where one party or the other would actually have to just claim wrongness or injury and actually sue in order to get that clarification if it becomes a question of what's reasonable for a church to hold for an event.
That's kind of a hard question to answer. Part of what we've discussed is that the conditional use permit is for a church, and so there's really no definition of church. There's not a list of limitations. There's not a, church includes weddings, funerals, bazaars, fairs, dinners, potlucks. Part of that is, we can't really get into what the business of the church is. But there are, it could be appropriate, and it's probably up to the council if you're inclined in going down that route. If we're looking at something where it is low density residential and it's a conditional use permit, possibly putting limitations on outdoor events in the way of noise, parking. There are a lot of possibilities here, and so it's tough to come up with a list to say, well, you can do bouncy castles, but you can't do it has to kind of stick to general principles, and it could be relating to parking, traffic, noise, access, public safety, those types of issues.
And Wade, we currently have ordinances that set limits on noise pollution and dust pollution, and don't we?
As far as dust, yes, we have air quality ordinances. Noise is we don't have in certain zones it's this many decibels. We don't have a noise ordinance like that. We have a disturbing the peace ordinance. So it becomes a little bit difficult, but it's not to say that we couldn't come up with something.
Thank you. I yield the floor.
Thank you, Alderwoman Scott. If this body doesn't mind, could I ask the city attorney a question too? Wade, the only issue that I kind of have with what you said, or maybe it's a clarification of what you just said, is on a conditional use permit, the only time we can set these different parameters is when it comes forward. We can't change a conditional permit once it's in place, correct? Or am I wrong? Without it possibly becoming a legal issue.
I think that's correct. There are issues with that, trying to change a permit that's been granted. The other thing I'll say is that I think just defining what a church is more what I'm looking at, that you say it's for a church, and a church can include a building with pews and a parking lot and that type of thing. I'm not saying necessarily this particular permit. I'm saying all church uses.
One of the things I would have to ask though is if we did make that definition, these churches already under a conditional use permit, would that retroactively affect them? I can't imagine it would without us getting into a lawsuit if they said, we feel like under the existing conditional use permit, we can do this event. And I think that's one of the questions that quite a few of us here had is something like this eventually going to have to be hashed out in the courts on what can we do, what can we not do, and I think it all comes down to property rights, because I do understand that the neighbors in the neighborhood feel like they should have the ability to have a low-density residential neighborhood. But also because the church was given that conditional use permit, what are the actual uses that a church can do? I personally supported the bull riding event. This, in my opinion, is a lot less intrusive than the bull riding event. But still, it's on that border of what they can't do. But until I think that this is tried in court, I think that they're going to pretty much be able to do what they think is right as a church, and it's unfortunately going to be stepping on the toes of the neighbors in the neighborhood. So we've got a no-win situation really here, in my opinion. But also as a council, we're in a position where we really cannot make any kind of determination. So, anyway, that's just my thoughts on this. If anybody else, Councilman Wright.
I look forward to the discussion on Monday, but if I might add a comparison, I think that if they were in here to get a motocross track or something like that, that'd be a different determination by a factor. Or if they were going to come in and put a rodeo arena, it'd be a different event. I agree with John and everybody else up here. We need some more discussion and clarification on why we are where we are, and I look forward to that Monday. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. And was there a motion on this yet? Yes. All in favor? All against? No. One against and the rest in favor. Item 18A, authorize mayor and finance officer to sign letter of agreement with Crown Castle, is that L.A.? L.A. for cell tower lease amendment.
I make a motion to send to council.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? You want to speak on it?
I just wanted it so that the public knows. This was a last-minute item. There's nothing attached. The reason we're sending it to council without recommendation is that the finance office will make sure things are attached for Monday night. Thank you.
And that was after it passed. So there was a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you.